Hey guys, and welcome back to another session of the Caddsman Architect Business Development Group. Today we're going to look at stories. Stories are a new feature that use some of the old items of name planes and advance those, tie into your existing zones, and give you really helpful level indicators that automatically update to a height of a datum. And so we're going to go through how they work, how to actually then customize it so that it works with the existing zones that you have and the way that you want to work in your database rather than just the way it sets up as default. It's going to be a great session, so let's get to it. So I'm going to use the additions and alterations template, which when you go new, you can just find it here on the drop down. So we'll just start with that. Now, this particular template is set up with an alteration additions garage and first, and then first garage and ground floor, which is obviously the proposed works, is how this is set up. Before, one of the issues, before we go into stories, what you've got here is you'll see that this is all set up with fixed tops and bottoms to each of the different zones. And what stories gives us is the ability to actually use named planes for the tops and bottoms of your zone. In this particular case, it's already got some named planes in place. So what I'm going to do is drop out of this dialog, jump into named planes. Before I do that, I'll just go back and make sure that I'm not utilizing named planes on any of the zones, because that one there was the one I just changed it. And because what I want to do is actually delete out the named planes. So we jump into named planes. Now, named planes actually normally are just completely invisible. They're just a set of levels or a plane that you can set and name it, and then utilize that in several different ways. But what we're wanting is these special name planes that the stories dialog creates, which are then annotated, and that's where the magic happens for us. And under name planes, no, we've only got default, so that's it. So we're going to go okay that. In the stories dialog, there are a couple of little issues with the stories dialog, and that is if you actually come into this dialog and utilize names for stories that match the existing zones, it recreates those zones and the views that relate to it, and resets all your view display properties to default settings. So if you've gone through your zones and set all your view display properties for all the different zones, and then you come in here and it resets them all, it's just a bit of a nightmare to then try and bring them all back. I will show you how to do that at the other end. But the best way to do it is actually come in here, do what you want to do, set these stories by a really logical name that is not the current zones, and then that'll give us all current views, and that'll then give us a real easy way out of not having to import the zone view display properties back over to bring them all back in. The other alternative is that you actually deliberately use the existing zones to create your stories, knowing that you're going to blank them out and then re-import them at the other end. So in this particular case, what I want to do, there's the ability to actually save out all the settings in here and re-import them. Not what I recommend because of that whole issue of resetting your zone view display properties. It's much better to just get it right in your template, use your template, then from that point forward, and not come back into this dialogue unless you absolutely have to add an extra level or something. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is pick names for each of my stories that is the name that I actually want to appear on the labeling. So that could be something like GND for something nice and short for ground. Ground floor would be another way of naming it. There's a whole bunch of different ways. Level 1, level 2, level 3. You decide how you want to name them. But once you've actually got them on the story labels, you're pretty much stuck with that naming. So you want to choose what you want it to be in a logical sort of way. The dialogue's broken into different areas, as you can see from the bubbles. And each of those different areas sort of interact with this table and stories in a different way. To set up how many levels above ground and below ground, you can set it here. Your naming convention you can pick here. So if I went levels, it would actually automatically name them down here. Floors doesn't have the option that I'm particularly wanting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go with levels. I actually want a garage level, a ground floor level, a first floor level, so, and a basement. So I'm going to just go garage, ground, insert another level above. Here you've got the ability to set your datum level and your ground height. I just leave that at 0. Datum, you actually have the ability to set at any time without coming into this dialog by actually setting it later here, which again, because of that resetting of the zone view display properties, that's the way you change your datum. You don't come back in here to change it. Right, now we've got our 4 stories set up. For each of these 4 stories, you'll create multiple name planes. You'll create a zone by each of these names. And whether you create a view by this name or not depends on whether in this section of the dialog box, whether you actually have the plan cut height set or not. So in this case, at the moment, we're creating a view called first, a view called ground, a view called garage, but we're not going to be creating a view called basement. Of course, what we actually want is we're going to show the ground and the garage all on the one plan. So we actually don't want a view for the garage. So we're going to untick that. It's now clear. We do want a view created for the basement, so we tick that. Similarly, with the finished floor level or the ceiling height, we're actually wanting name planes created for each of those with their markers. But which stories those are created for depends again on if there's a value in here or not. If there's no value, the name plane won't be created. So for first floor, if we untick that, we wouldn't get a finished floor level name plane. We would only get the ceiling. With that, we'd only get the floor level. In this case, we want both. And we want to make sure we're going to show them by ticking each of these 3 boxes here. The substrate level is being shown, the finished floor level is going to be shown, and the ceiling level is going to be shown. If we didn't want to be using substrates, we can untick that, keep to the domestic sort of setup. If we want the substrates created, we're going to tick that. That's what we're going to do in this case. These are just temporary indicators that are showing. You can switch them on and off at any point. So all we're going to do now is go OK. You'll have seen now we have a basement view. We have the demo first, ground and first. They've all been created for us. If we jump into name planes, you'll see that there's a series of named planes created for each of the stories, together with a peak. And we can OK that. If we jump into properties for the zones, you'll see that there is a series of zones that have been created in here as well for the ground, first, garage that we created. There should also be basement up the top there. We'll come back to this in a second. We're just going to jump to the elevations. So on the elevations, this is each of the elevations. This is where we've actually had our name plane markers shown. If we jump around to each of the 4 views, and also in the section view, we've got them created. If you decided, for instance, that you wanted to pick them out in a separate color, you can actually modify each of those here. Or the good little trick is you jump to the ISO view, you go show, Control A for select all, right click, hit end to display all, and then you can use group change, select the color that you want them to show. I'm going to pick a nice mid blue. Make sure that your set plane includes set, so set to yes. Control A for select all. That sets them all to the one set of colors. You can do that with layers. You can change their color, style, weight. You don't probably want to get mucking around with the style. You can change their weight. Jump back to your elevation, and there they are, looking as we would expect. So now we're going to move on to now tying the zones to the name planes. And what it's also done is it's created a series of zones in here by those same names that I used. But in this case, what I'm wanting to do is actually change my zones to now relate to the zones that I already had. So for instance, in the ground floor, it goes from ground floor to first floor. So it's much more of a commercial sense that a story goes from floor level to floor level, not the way I want to set it up, because I actually want my walls to go from floor to ceiling. The issue is I've now got the name planes, so I can go to my existing ground floor. I can then change from fixed heights to name planes, and I can say I want my ground floor to go from my ground level to go from ground floor to ground ceiling. And I can just work my way through garage. In this case, I actually want my garage to go from, I want my garage to go from garage floor to ceiling. And my first floor, which was an existing zone, from first floor to first ceiling. Now, the beauty here by using the name planes is when I actually go to the existing ground floor, I can actually set those to the same name planes, which is ground finished floor to ceiling. And what that'll mean is when I actually adjust the floor to ceiling height of my markers, it will actually change both the ground floor and the existing ground floor and the demo ground floor all in the one lot, because they're all pointing to the same name planes. So existing garage, we can go. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to probably go to the demo ground floor. I'll just finish off the ground floor ones, and then I'll show you how it all pulls together. Ground floor and ground ceiling. Okay, so when I go to my plan view, I don't see anything because I haven't drawn anything. But in my elevation view, I'll have all these nice new markers that have turned up. And ground level is the one that I've actually fully set up. In here, I've decided I wanted the SLs, but in fact I don't. So I can just select them and hide them. So just go up and use the hide in current view. You will need to go through and do that in each of the different levels. What it's actually set up for me is a basement, a garage, a ground floor, a first floor, and a peak. Now peak's great, except for you've got no control over its name at all. If you don't want to call it peak, the simple little trick you can do to get around that is you can go to your annotation, change text, and then just change it to, instead of a fixed, a scale. Oh, change text to scaled. Obviously I have something selected. Try it. Third time lucky, hey? Pick the text and you'll actually need to jump around to each of them. And because I changed it, it's actually still says peak there, but it's tiny, tiny. And then I can stick whatever text I like next to that. I normally put ridge and how high it is above natural ground level, and it relates to, you know, I can then have it near that. Of course, in this particular case, let's say my building doesn't have a basement and I don't want to have basement showing up. I can just select all three of the markers for basement and go hide. And of course, my garage isn't necessarily below my ground floor, but what we're going to do is grab hold of my garage items and I can go move, select my garage level, and I'm going to use an inline and reference, which I normally use by a hotkey, that one. So just here, snap to that point, turn ortho on, and let's say it's 170 below. So now I can actually overlap my my levels. So my ground stepping down from my garage stepping down from my ground floor. In the stories dialog box, it doesn't allow for that. But once you come into here, you can set it up this way and easily get the levels to what you want. In this particular case, we're 2.8 meters above the datum, which is obviously not what we want. What I normally use is I normally set my ground floor level to 0 height. So that way I know if I'm wanting my building at RL 100.4, I know that my finished floor level is at 0. When I set my datum to 100.4, it'll actually marry up and say the right things. So in this case, everything's 3 meters too high. I'm just going to select all of these and bring it down 3 meters. And you'll now see that the ground floor is 0. If I go back to my zones, go to datum, put in my datum value, might be 100.00, and it updates here and on every occurrence of these markers automatically. So I'm just going to jump back to my ground floor. Now, with these extra views that it created, I might say, actually, I really like the fact that it created a first floor view. It created a ground floor, but I actually want my ground floor to look like my plan and use my plan's display settings. I can easily do that by selecting my ground floor, right clicking and coming down to here, copy my display settings from and select my plan.
Peter, it's obscured by the people.
You can move your people. Just grab hold of them and drag them.
Oh, rather got them.
I just wish I could see the word plan. There it is. Right. So now what that has done is it's taken the display properties from here where it goes display settings for ground floor, was color 3, weights and so on. It's copied all of these zone view display properties for all the different settings and popped them into my new ground view. I can delete my plan view if I don't want that plan anymore and just want to work with ground. Now, I don't want a garage plan as such, so I'm going to actually delete that and rearrange myself to what I want. That way, with copying from another view is a really quick and easy way to do that. So I'm going to just go to my ground plan, go to walls, put in my wall, just a box for the building. And then when I go back to my elevations, you'll see that that has not gone in on the ground zone. Why did that not go in on the ground zone? Or I've done something wrong with my ground zone. So if I come into back to zones, I will have set my ground to ground finished floor level. And I want it to go to ground ceiling level. And I go, okay. Rebuild. And go to my elevation. And you'll see it now goes from my ground to my ground with a step down. So for my garage, I'll go, actually at this stage, I don't want my garage levels over my building. My garage is going to be far out over here, somewhere to the left. So I can just select the 2 levels, right click and go move left, label. It moves it over to the left and move the right label and it will move over to the right. And in this case, I didn't go far enough. I can actually hide my right label so that I don't have it on there and move my right label, move the right one a bit further over. So I can just adjust them around, have them exactly where I want. And I need to do that for each elevation or each section. These also show up in sections. So I just adjust them around to how I want them. The unadjusted ones, if I come in here, those go auto extents. So if I actually go back to my ground floor, which now, because the ground floor was set up all at the wrong heights, I now need to just come in here. I can actually set my ground floor height to 1800. Okay, that. Rebuild. And if I then grab my wall, stretch my building out, go back to my elevation, because they're auto adjusting, they've all stretched out to beyond the extents of my built form, except for garage over here, because he was turned off onto, I placed where I wanted him to start and finish. And so he doesn't auto adjust. If I decide that I want my markers on a particular layer or color, I can simply select them, select my color and choose, let's say I want them in nice bright blue. I can whack them in there, they'll be nice bright blue. And that will actually adjust them on all the different markers, I say, and then they haven't. let's go. Actually, I think they have adjusted them all. Oh yeah, there we go. So now we've got them all in the blue. Of course, if you decide that that blue was a bit too leery, you can actually modify your color. Did we use 150? 150. I can click on, if I select on the selected swatch, I can come into my color mixer and say, let's make it a little bit more of a sedate blue. So I can mix my colors. They're just an indexed color. What else do we need to do? If you're in a hide lines view, which obviously elevations normally are, by default, your markers are just normal standard text. You can actually go to text, change, and change them to halo by changing to yes and selecting that. And that will just change that one selected label to a halo view. Obviously, under settings, you'll need to have halo actually set so that it's displaying and how far out the halo extends. So you'd want to switch those all on for both plotting and for on screen. 0.2 is actually quite good as a setting, and now it actually blanks out anything that that's behind it. So if that particular wall had brick hatching on there, and you want to be able to really clearly read your label, you may want to switch it to haloing, and that's fine. It will just remember it within there. Within the actual zone itself, go back to our ground floor. If we go wall, and we're going to go to demo ground floor, we're going to whack in a wall, say through here. In this view, it's set so that it doesn't display, and I'm going to change to existing ground floor and put another wall in here. Obviously, it's set to not display here as well. But if I go to the elevation, I will then have the 3 different walls, all in different zones, but they all, if I adjust, let's say, decide that it's not 2.7 ceilings, that it's actually 3 meter ceilings, I'm going to go up 300, and it'll adjust all of those zones all in the one go, because they're all related to the same name plane and defined by the name plane. So that's a way of just keeping everything all locked in together by using the name planes. I'm going to just so just put that back on. But yeah, so you can't change the you're stuck with those. As I said, with the peak, I use ridge, not peak. Can't change that. One of the options that you could do if you wanted something different for peak is you could actually put in another level, but then it's going to have SL, CL, or FFL, depending on which one you're using.
So if I put it on a drawing sheet, and I have 2 elevations side by side on my drawing sheet.
Yep.
Do I have those lines on either side of each view?
So what I would typically do is I'll open up, where are we? This one. I'll open up the drawing sheet for elevations for this job. It's going slow. Right, so that's how I've set them up on this particular job. So yeah, for each view, so what I've done here is it's obviously a multi-dwelling development. I've actually set up each of my buildings is a separate model. Each of my ground floors are set at 0 height in that particular model. I've then got all my elevation markers, level markers all set, and I can set a datum for each model, and I've then referenced those two models in to the one site and referenced them in at different levels so that they're appropriately adjusted. So here it's about 170 millimeters higher for dwelling 1 over dwelling 2. And then I set my datum in my site where I've referenced them in, and it automatically updates everything correctly. And so I normally use the actual datum that is on the survey as my datum, and then I reference my buildings in with a Z height appropriately in relation to the survey datum, and set it all up, and it all keeps track of it all. And if I decided that this building should be a little higher, I can re-reference it in up a little higher, and it will automatically update. There are times that you just need to be careful. There's some little glitch somewhere in the system that on the elevations, when you've got a datum for each of your models that's different to the datum for your site, and so on. Sometimes it reads the wrong datum. Not quite sure why it does that. But effectively, this is just the one model by itself. So in dwelling 1, I've actually set the datum to 42.97, which then means that when I've brought the view in specifically from that model, it shows at 42.7. But then where I've brought them together in my site development elevation, that'll have the datum of the actual site and referenced in at the appropriate height to get the 42.97 showing up here.
So on that view, where you've got two views, the northwest elevation and the southeast elevation, how come you've only got the titles on one side of the drawing? How did you get rid of the others on the other side of the drawing?
Right, okay, I'll jump back to, so in this guide that we're working on before, so we've got our ground level, we select however many you want to actually adjust. So in this case, we might go ground floor, first floor, and we right click, and then you can just go hide left label or hide right label.
Okay.
So in this case, I'll hide the right one, and the right ones have all disappeared. I can then go move right label and move him into here, and I can go move left label, bring him into here, and place them just however I want. I can then just say, I want my first floor ones moved in a bit further, and I want the bottom of the first floor one, move it right over here. I'm going to hide my SLs, and in this case, I haven't got a basement in this development, so I'm going to hide my basement, and I want to adjust my my garage ones. Let's say this is the garage here, and I might choose to go hide left and move my left label to that line there, which is just to the extent of the garage. And I decided I don't want this on top of my building over this way, so I can just move my left and move them out to the side. I can actually go move left, and I hide show, move left, and just snap to something else, and it will snap to line up with the other ones. There is a function to actually dimension. And it will actually put the dimension there. And when you actually move the label, it'll dynamically keep with it. There seems to be, I think it's when you actually then dimension the same level on another elevation. There's times where that will then, it won't connect all of them together. And so I avoid using that just because it sometimes breaks what's going on. Should you ever break one of your levels, you can actually just go to another database, which is, you can just delete it, go to another database, so back to your template, copy it off, come into your model and paste with a cut and paste, and you'll bring a fresh one back in that's not broken.
Can you adjust the text? I know you can't edit the text, but can you adjust the size and everything of the text?
Yeah. So just what I was doing before with the halo, you just use the text tools, text change.
With the boxing then as well.
Yeah, so in fact, you probably find if I change it to a 1.4, this may be what I've done on mine as to why it doesn't, move towards it. Text change.
Use your horizontal spacing.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's a horizontal spacing of 2, and let's make it go to left instead of right. See what that does to us. Yeah, that doesn't do nice things.
We'll move it -1.
Change it back to right. Text change. That was vertical spacing. Horizontal spacing of 1. I think that'll just spread my letters out. Horizontal spacing of 0. Vertical justification. No.
So you can't get rid of the box around the RL?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I go box none, okay, I can get rid of the boxed.
Okay.
So yeah, you can. So you can do a fair bit of stuff. I just
change the name.
It's been there a long time, Peter, that glitch.
Yeah, it's. I can't remember how I got it with my ones not having that. I actually have the space on mine, so I don't know how I ended up whether I how I ended up with mine.
It seems to be all the original TPLs that have the problem.
So that's working from the same text insert point. So we'll have to get Milton to look into that to spread it out again.
At the same time, ask him why you can't change the titles, why you can't rename them.
The FLs and the CLs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense to just in the stories. Well, what I'd love to see is actually the ability to just take any name plane and say that it's an annotated name plane and tell it what you want on the annotation.
Yeah.
And then you could put in whatever extra ones you wanted, however you want them, and not even need to use the stories, just annotated name planes, and away you go. That would be a really helpful, logical next step with them, I think. But they're a very helpful tool with just keeping track of lots of levels and so on. Particularly if you've got, you're doing a big multi-unit project and you've got 6 buildings and stuff going everywhere to keep track of it all. The other one that I'd like to see added is on your plan to be able to put just a label that tells you what that name plane level is as well. So then when it adjusts, it would automatically update the finished floor level on your plan.
Yeah.
And that way you'd put in one for a deck, one for your landings, one for your ground floor, and then you would just use those named planes to label it on the plan and adjust your named planes to update everywhere else. That'd be really useful tools to go forward with. But this is what we've got at the moment.
Yep.
Hey guys, just popping in for a last little bit of bonus content. It was asked, how do we deal with the issue of the FFL colliding with the RL? I'm just going to show you how to fix that. It's quite simple. You just use the normal stretch command, but we're going to use an inline entity mask of text and OK. The reason why we're doing this is because there's a shared insert point. You can't window over it and get it, but with the inline text masking, you can grab hold of it. We're just going to need to move it over 170 mil, and that problem is fixed. Now, once again, this is a good reason to do this in your template because that relationship remains. So you only have to do it once. Unless you go back into the stories dialog, then you'll have to redo it again because it recreates all of these things. Hope this helps. Looking forward to our next session together. See you then.